Welcome to Kenny's G League, the only podcast all about the Rip City Remix. On today's episode, we're talking about training camp that just got underway for the Remix, a few of the events coming up really soon for the team, and just a general lookout at what to expect come regular season in just a week here. Training camp for the Remix is underway, so let's take a quick look at who's participating. We've got a list of 15 players plus the 3 two-way players the team has participating in training camp. I'm just going to read through the list of players we've got here. Chudier Bile, George Condit IV, Antoine Davis, Jerry Foster, Trey Gomillion, Ashton Higgins, Justin Jackson, Lacey James, Drake Jeffries, Kevin Knox, Kevin McLean, Brandon, Rachel, Quentin Rose, Malachi Smith, and Romeo Weems. A good mix of players, some of whom have quite a number of years' experience, like Justin Jackson, who is a bit of an NBA veteran at this point. He's bounced around the league to several teams, and the roster also right now features a bunch of G League rookies. The roster minus 2 contracts stands at 15, so cuts will need to be made this week to get the roster down to size. I believe you need to have 10 plus the 2A contracts. Now, within the training camp roster, there's some interesting details on what types of contracts players are on. So I want to dive into that today to attempt to get some clarity on that. It's been a little confusing for me, honestly, just to kind of try to figure out what all these different types of contracts mean. So let's look at that. First, there are two-way contracts, which you might be familiar with. Players with a two-way contract are part of the G League team, but can spend 50 game days with their NBA affiliate during the season. Two-way contracts do not count against the NBA team's salary cap, which I'm assuming is part of why this summer the Blazers had a completely new two-way player roster, despite re-signing Ibu Baji and John Butler Jr. just a few months ago during the summertime. The NBA is allowing 3 two-way players this year, the Blazers' two-way players being Dwap Breath, Justin Minaya, and Skylar Mays. Another type of contract that you see are Exhibit 10 contracts, which is essentially a training camp invite from the NBA affiliate team where the connected G League team gets first dibs on the player should they get cut from the NBA team during training camp. If the player then spends 60 days in the G League, they receive a pretty substantial bonus of $75,000. Sometimes you see players get signed to a training camp roster and then almost immediately cut, as was the case with Justice Winslow in Toronto recently, if you were kind of following Justice Winslow's career arc here. It allows the player to compete for a spot on the G League roster while being eligible for this bonus. That bonus is of $75,000 is really considerable, considering that the pretty standard G League contract is for around $40,000 to $50,000. The Remix have a handful of players on these types of deals by my count, with Malachi Smith, Antoine Davis, George Condit IV, Ashton Higgins, and Kevin Knox all having been cut from the Blazers training camp roster. Some of those, when they were announced as Exhibit 10 contracts. Others, like Kevin Knox, I'm not sure if it was announced as that, but I'm assuming that is what it falls under, since it kind of follows what you would expect to see from an Exhibit 10. Sometimes you'll see these things referred to as affiliate players as well. So if you're paying attention to like the Woj tweets, every once in a while you'll see it called an affiliate player. Also on the training camp roster are players that the Remix hold returning player rights to. Returning player rights are, from my understanding, not terribly important in the league, since many players have their rights owned by a team but go on to play in an overseas league, or maybe they get called up to the NBA or get a two-way spot with another team anyway, even though a G League team may own their returning player rights. But it is something to at least be aware of, and from my understanding, when a player gets traded, their returning player rights move to their new team. So for instance, when Ibu Baji was cut recently, he was able to return to the Wisconsin Herd relatively easily, as they had his returning player rights. The Remix, by my count, have 16 players that they have returning player rights to, 8 of whom are participating in training camp. Those players that are participating in training camp are Chudier Bile, Justin Jackson, Quentin Rose, Romeo Weems. Those players were all taken in the expansion draft earlier this summer. Drake Jeffrey and Lacey James, who the Remix traded for recently, and Brandon Ratchell and Kevin McLean, who were just drafted a few days ago in the G League's draft. Jerry Foster and Trey Gamillion are also at training camp. I assume they were just invited to participate, probably players that they've been in contact with and kind of aware of for a while. So the Remix could potentially have their rights should they make the team. Like I said, my understanding is that returning player rights isn't something to get too hung up on since there's so much roster movement during the season. But I think it's something to note just since it's kind of a phrase that you'll see thrown around. The players that the Remix have rights to but are not at training camp are all playing basketball in various leagues throughout the world. All that to say, even a brand new team can have a lot of options available to them, as I think is kind of the goal of the G League, to have a large pool of talent that teams can pull from and develop, even if many of those players don't necessarily suit up for a team in the G League at the time or potentially ever. I have a list of players that I'll put on Twitter, and it's got, for all these additional players that are not at training camp, I just put next to their names where they're playing for now, and they're playing all over the world. It's pretty cool to see, from Poland to Japan to Germany. It's pretty cool just to kind of see all the talent that's throughout the world, and maybe someday they'll play on a team in the league, or maybe their horizons are leading them elsewhere. I don't know, but it's just cool to see. And since of course so many players play throughout the world, you'll see guys kind of bump in and be teammates with players you might be familiar with from the Trailblazers pretty rarely, like Jarrell Brantley, who's now playing in Japan, was just recently last season playing in New Zealand, and him and Ryan Rupert were teammates, got some minutes together. I posted a couple very quick highlights up on Twitter, in the middle of October. There's a couple cool little highlights there you can see. So all that to say, that's where things stand right now with the roster. Additionally, expect some of the young Trailblazers to spend time with the Remix this season. It's not uncommon at all for unseasoned NBA players to be assigned to the affiliate team for a little while, so I'd be looking for guys like Ryan Rupert and Chris Murray to see some action there. Occasionally, you'll also see veteran players returning from injury to be briefly assigned to the G League to ramp up into game shape. But that's a little bit less often, and it does get slightly trickier because a more veteran player, I think a player more than 3 years in the league, they have to agree to it, which I don't imagine players don't agree to it very often, but it's not quite the same as a super young player where the team just assigns them to it. So with all these players in mind, I wanted to dive into a tiny bit of background, at least for the players that we know will be around right now. So we're going to start with the two-way players. The Blazers fans got to know Dwap Reith at 2023 Summer League. The 6'9" center put up averages of 13 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks in 5 games. He played college basketball for the LSU Tigers, where he was teammates with Remix legend and Blazers legend Skylar Mays and Remix legend Brandon Ratchell in the 2017-2018 season. He's played for a number of international teams, the FIBA World Cup and the 2021 Olympics with Australia, where he was teammates with Blazers legends Matisse Thybulle and Patty Mills, and Blazers villain Joe Ingles. In my incredibly in-depth research on Dwap Reith, I ran across a clip where he was talking to reporters about the first time he ever saw snow. So let's hear what he had to say about snow.
No, today was the first day of me dealing with snow. Yeah, it was crazy.
What'd you do?
When I came outside, I didn't know what to expect. I was just like, damn. I was excited at first though. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then I just went out there, just touched the snow, and it touched funny, but it felt funny, and it was good though. It was cold though.
You never ran into snow in Texas when you were playing there? Or y'all didn't
never.
get any last year? I can't remember if we had any on the
Never. I had never seen snow before.
So, were you with somebody this morning? Did you make a
I had
snowball
an
and throw it at
exam.
somebody?
I had an exam in the morning. I don't think I know how to make a snowball, so I think I learned that.
That's Tremont. I'm sure he knows how.
Yeah, Tremont could probably go
He's
help
from
you out.
Connecticut, yeah.
He said he feels at home right now.
Yeah.
Justin Minaya spent a few games in Portland last season, so you might be familiar with him. The 6'5" wing played college basketball for South Carolina and Providence, and played last season in the G League for the Mexico City Capitans, where he averaged 12.7 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals per game. Also on the Capitans last season were Blazers legends Shabazz Napier, Skylar Mays, and Skal Labissiere. Just as a little fun fact, his father, Omar Minaya, had a pretty interesting career as a Major League Baseball general manager, working for the Mets, Expos, and Padres. So if you're into baseball and that kind of random trivia, it's kind of a interesting look through Wikipedia to see a little bit of info about his career in the MLB. Skylar Mays has quite a bit of experience in the NBA and other leagues. This is his 4th NBA season, so it's his last to be eligible for a 2-way contract. Like I said earlier, he's been teammates with Dwap Reith, Justin Minaya, and Brandon Ratchell at different points through college basketball and the G League. I think there's a lot to like about Mays, and while I would never be caught watching an NBA game because I am only a G League fan, I would never watch the NBA, would never participate in the discourse or anything like that. Sources say he's looked pretty good in his time with the Trailblazers already this season. Sounds like he's got some very solid backup point guard potential in the NBA. And he did play with Atlanta for a couple seasons, getting some minutes there as a reserve guard. The thing that's interesting to me about the Blazers' 2-way players this year is that they've all got experience and have been around for a little while. Reith is 27, Minaya is 24, and Mays is 26. I kind of assumed that teams would use 2-ways on super young long shot type players. And even, I think last season we saw that. They were looking, at John Butler Jr. and Ibu Baji, who are both very young players. And I kind of thought that would be the mold that they would continue to go in, locking them in for a year or two, kind of trying to fast track development for a younger player with, more untapped potential, I guess you could say. But looking around the league, there's lots of teams that use 2-ways for players in their mid-20s, while players that they're drafting are often younger. I think about the Blazers and Ryan Rupert, who's very young, who got drafted by the team, and he's there on the the regular roster, while these 2-way players have more experience, but they'll be able to kind of play for both teams. I'll have to see if I can find out if there's a general consensus around that kind of thing, but I will say that just having seen Skylar Mays play some with the Blazers, maybe teams are seeing these 2-way spots kind of as a combination of development mixed with end-of-the-bench break glass in case of emergency insurance, rather than just a way to develop super young players. Be interesting to see how teams use those spots in general, but that's kind of what I'm seeing so far anyway. I think about Dwap Reith, and I thought he looked pretty good at Summer League, and to be honest, I thought he looked more solid than Ibu Baji, although Ibu Baji probably has, higher upside potential down the line. And maybe Ibu Baji comes back at some point. Sounds like the Blazers were very interested in him, but did decide to let him go, and now he's back with the Herd, like I said earlier. But as we've seen with some trades from the Remix already, it seems like if you're interested in a player and another team has their rights, it's certainly possible to make a deal happen that's in the best interest of both teams. So I would be curious to see if they attempt to make a little trade to bring Ibu Baji back, because they do seem pretty high on him. So that's what's going on with the roster right now. Outside of that, the Remix announced that all 24 home games are going to be broadcast on over-the-air TV on Fox 12. So if you've got an old TV antenna, go find that and get it set up on your TV. Make sure you can get those games. Although all the home games, home and away, do stream online for free. I'll put a link in the description of this episode to that. So you'll be able to see it on TV. And my understanding is you'll be able to see it online. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure how blackout restrictions work for the G League. Maybe they exist, maybe they don't. We'll find that out pretty soon. because the season's coming right up. The first game's on the 10th. They're also doing a fan fest. That's right around the corner. That's on the 3rd of November. So grab a free ticket to that. Thank you for listening to today's brief episode. I'll have another episode once the roster kind of gets completed and we see who's going to make the opening day roster. From there, expect some movement through the season. My understanding is the G League moves pretty fast. There's lots of movement during the season. I'll talk to you soon. As always, follow the podcast at Kenny's G League on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time.